It's Monday, guys. That means it's time for a Halo Q&A. So for those of you just joining us, the rules are very simple. All you have to do is leave your Halo-related questions in the comment section below, and hopefully they'll be answered on next week's show. So we're going to kick this week off with a question from Mr. Jubafob, who says, Halo Q&A, do you think that 343 are completely to blame for the sudden shift in art and gameplay style in Halo 4, or do you think they were just building on the precedent that Bungie set? A lot of people seem to blame the new gameplay and art design features on 343, but it kind of seems like in some ways at least they were just continuing down the path that Bungie seemed to be going down anyway. What, with the progressively more clunky and brutish design of the elites, armor abilities, the introduction of a class system, etc., where do you honestly think Bungie would have taken Halo if they had kept with it? Keep up the great work, my dude. So, I actually completely agree with you. This is something that I don't think people discuss quite a lot. Now, were Bungie going to ever implement full-blown Call of Duty style create a class systems in Halo? I doubt it. I don't think that was the route that they were ever going down if they had stuck with the Halo franchise. But I do think 343 was looking at a lot of the things that that Halo Reach had introduced, and they tried to build upon them. They were probably like, oh, they've got sprint going on, so yeah, let's do sprint. Okay, they're starting to do kind of like a loadout thing. Let's go with the next logical evolution of that, which is allowing you to customize your loadouts and stuff. The armor abilities, they're doing that, so let's just do armor abilities as well in Halo 4. And I do think that, well, a lot of the decisions that 343 made weren't exactly the greatest, mainly the created class system and a lot of the artistic decisions. They were looking at Reach for inspiration, and they were trying to just build upon what Reach was starting. And at the time, Reach was the popular Halo game, so it did make sense that they were taking cues from the latest Halo in the franchise and what people liked about it and what they thought they could improve from that experience to make the next Halo experience even like, oh, you guys like that? Well, we're gonna make it that, but even more. I do think that Halo 4 would have been a lot different if instead of looking towards Reach for inspiration on where they should start to expand, I do think that they should have looked towards Halo 3 for inspiration. Now, that being said, you know, at the time it might not have made sense if it was like, okay, let's look towards a game that is currently, like, really old, you know, like, oh, Halo 3, why not look at Halo Reach? That's the new one that everyone's playing. But if they were to expand on some of the things that Halo 3 had done, I do think Halo 4 would have felt more like a true sequel to Halo 3. Like, take a look at the equipment and how you can innovate that differently. Look at the art from Halo 3 and how you can change some of that, the gameplay, the design of the multiplayer and stuff. Overall, I hope that answers your question, dude. So we are going to move on to Solid Square, who says, Q&A. How do you think Halo 6 should be with the movement system? Halo 5 was very fast-paced, and after I put over 17 years into the franchise, playing the game, I like the new movement. Now, it's not perfect, and some things do need to be changed or removed, looking at you, Spartan Charge. So should we have this new system or a more classic movement system? So in my opinion, here's the thing, okay? Everybody hates Sprint, and they think that Sprint does not belong in Halo under any circumstances, and there are probably people even saying, well, it doesn't. Like right now, that's something that I disagree with. I think it is all about implementation into the game. Like, if you were to look at Sprint on paper, you're like, no. No, not with Halo, but I do think Sprint can work in Halo if implemented correctly. I think out of all the sprints so far, Halo 5 was the best implementation of it. That doesn't mean it's flawless, though. There is currently a Proving Grounds playlist in Halo 5 that basically, whenever you sprint, you show up on the radar. I do think that is pretty good and maybe something to kind of look at moving forward, because I do think currently the problem with Halo is sprint should not be like a mandatory way of moving around the map and stuff. Sprint should be more of a utility. If anything, maybe Sprint could be some kind of pickup for people. But overall, I do think that they should look towards making sprint a utility that you can use as opposed to just a thing that you can do, like punching or even moving forward, if that makes any sense. And the reason that I say that is because I do think that Halo 5 has sped up the combat a little bit too much. I think Halo 5, playing that and then going back to a classic Halo game, I do like playing the older Halo games. I've been playing a little bit of MCC lately, and man, Halo 3 is still my favorite online Halo game. And I definitely do think that the older Halo games, people can say that they're outdated or whatever, and you know, there are a lot of outdated systems, but one thing that I do think is objectively better about the older Halo games is, due to the slower pace of the matches, it gives you more time to think. There's more strategy involved, because in Halo 5, when everyone's running around everywhere and everything's crazy and people are like sprinting around corners and Spartan charging, and it's just like, where is everybody? Everyone's moving so fast. There are a lot of factors that you just cannot account for because everybody is zooming around the map so fast. Now, that being said, I do think that Halo 5 is a very well-balanced Halo game, but I think the problem is, while the new enhanced movement system was very tastefully done in the 4v4 Slayer, it created a lot of aftershocks that negatively affected the Halo sandbox as a whole in ways that I don't think 343 was anticipating. I think that the clambering, it pretty much made elevation a non-issue now. Like, elevated maps don't really matter anymore, because it's like, oh, there's a ledge up there, well, whatever, you know, I don't need to use the stairs or try to find a way to get to that elevated position. I can just jump and hoist myself up there. I think that clamber, while it does make sense on paper and it does improve the gameplay a little bit, it just makes elevation kind of trivial. You might as well just design all the maps to be completely flat, because, like, elevation doesn't matter anymore. I also think that the thruster pack and stuff, while it is a lot of fun to use in Halo 5, you could easily do without it if you only just increased your strafe speed. Because when someone throws a grenade at you, you know, you thrust to the left to get out of the grenade and you can dodge the explosion. Well, why not just increase your side-to-side strafing speed? That way you could easily walk out of the way of the grenade, like in previous games, where your strafing speed was much quicker and you could just easily sidestep out of the way of a grenade and stuff. I think, though, that overall, the most, in my opinion, the worst of the new, like, Spartan ability things that definitely has done a lot more to damage Halo than a lot of people are really talking about, I think, is the smart scoping. I've been thinking a little while now, and I'm thinking of doing a video on it, but basically, I think that the smart scoping, well, it seems like it, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean by smart scoping? Basically, due to the fact that now every weapon has essentially aiming down the sights, and a lot of the automatics now, when you aim down the sights with them, they actually do get increased stability, they get increased range, like increased aim assist range, lower recoil and stuff. Due to the fact that now you can use automatics at a much longer range than previous Halo games, the speed of a lot of projectile-based weapons now need to be increased. You notice that the storm rifle, the plasma bolts on it, they travel really fast. Same with the plasma pistol and all the other, like, plasma-based weapons. So when you're in the campaign, due to the way now that the weapons have been redesigned so that they can be used at longer ranges, the bullets all travel much faster. I found that in Halo 5's campaign, most of my time was spent huddling behind a corner or behind a box from cover because elites are sniping me across the map with storm rifles and stuff. I also think it was a very big mistake to allow automatic weapons to be used for aiming down the sights, not just for the reasons that I just gave, the way that it negatively impacts the campaign and stuff by basically moving it a step closer to just being a traditional first-person shooter, where every gun is aiming down the sights, the enemies are shooting at you from an insanely long range, and really you just end up hiding behind cover, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to kill them. It really, really hurts the player versus enemy combat. but also just because of the way that in the multiplayer, it encourages you to use weapons that honestly, use weapons that should be used for close range to medium range engagements, using them at a long range. Like, I cannot tell you how many times I have been killed by people who use the SMG as a long-range weapon. Like, the SMG, when you scope in with it, it is really accurate, and it shouldn't be. The SMG should be used only at a close range. When discussing the effects of aiming down the sights or smart scoping on forums like Reddit or Waypoint or whatever, I do want all of you guys, like the people who really dislike smart scoping, instead of just saying, nope, doesn't belong in Halo or whatever, should be removed instantly, you've got to try to explain it much clearer. Like, give an objective reason why you feel it is damaging Halo's sandbox, alright? Don't just use buzzwords like, it's shit, or something like that. I mean, you know, you've got to be very specific, because I think this is one of those situations where we do have to be specific, because if 343 employees are reading the forums and they're just seeing, smart scoping's dumb, needs to be removed, like, they're just gonna roll their eyes and be like, oh my gosh, like, these people aren't giving an argument, they just don't want change. But if they were to read something like, these are the reasons why, and you give an example like, explaining the way it negatively impacted the campaign, see, that's a little bit more substantial, and they can take that to the higher-ups and say, like, look, they're bringing up these really good points, maybe we should discuss some of these things in the next meeting. I know I went off on a bit of a tangent there, but hopefully I was able to answer a little bit of your question. Personally, I'm not too sure what I would want from Halo 6, but I definitely know I'd want a lot of the Spartan abilities to be toned down considerably. So we're going to move on to a question from Joey Suma, who says, Q&A. What do you think 343 can do to make Warzone and Warzone Firefight better? Well, for Halo 6, I would completely redesign and reconstruct the Warzone game mode, because I do think it is very flawed at its core. The idea of Warzone is very cool, but the issue is the way that the rec system was implemented. I do not think it's very smart to allow people to just spawn with whatever weapon they want. I also do think that an issue arises as you continue to unlock more and more recs to be able to be used in Warzone. The issue is that as you begin to unlock other variants, normal variants become more and more worthless. Currently, I've got tons of Spanker Primes and stuff like that, and it just basically is like, why would I ever use the regular Spanker now? Why? There is no reason to. I've got tons of the Spanker Primes, and it's basically made the regular ones worthless. Or let's look at the Storm Rifle, for example. The Fury and the, gosh, I forgot the name of the other one, but basically the two Storm Rifle variants that you can unlock are so much better than the base Storm Rifle. It makes, once you unlock those guys, the base Storm Rifle is useless. Why would you ever spawn one in Warzone after you've unlocked its variants and stuff? And that being said, I could just pick up a Storm Rifle off of a dead elite, so why should I even have the option to spawn it in? I'm never going to. I can just find them on the field. And then with the Spartan Laser, like, that's such a, like, could you imagine if in the 4v4 Slayer, you just had the ability to spawn in with a power weapon? You can see a problem there. And the thing is, people could say, well, no, it's balanced, because you have to use rec energy to spawn it in. It's like, okay, I can spawn in a power weapon every 3 minutes. Like, it doesn't matter, it just delays when I can spawn in a weapon that wasn't designed to be spawned in with. Like, all it is putting a little timer on how long until I can spawn with a BS weapon that really people can't fight against. And it can cause a lot of weird issues with the sandbox. And then I do think that there are other weapons where it's just like, why the universal across the board, every weapon is always the same price no matter what map you're playing on is also a little bit odd, because there are some weapons where some weapons are there are some maps where some weapons are very overpowered on, and then there are some maps where those same weapons are actually very weak on. But the thing is, the price is still about the same. Like, let's take a look at Raid on Apex 7 or something. That's a very open map, right? Lots of open space, lots of areas where you're just out in the open. Well, flying vehicles are very, very, very strong on those maps. Same with sniper rifles. Why aren't those priced just a little bit higher on that map, where you've got something like, I'm trying to think. You've got something like the map on Meridian, where sniper rifles are not as useful, but you can start seeing things like shotguns maybe are a little bit more useful because the map is a lot more close quarters. Like, why can't shotguns, the price of them, be raised a little bit just because they are so useful on that map? Overall, it's just like there's these weird problems with the way that having just like universally across all maps, all the weapons are priced the same. Just there are problems that brings. Personally, for me, I would create some kind of class system for Warzone where you spawn in with a class and essentially that class will be given its own set of loadouts that you work towards. Like, you can play as kind of like an ODST class where it's very much focused on SMGs and being very quick and kind of engaging people in close range combat, or there could be more sniper-focused classes where they can have access to DMRs and sniper rifles and stuff, or you've got like your traditional assault class where you have access to like the assault rifle and the battle rifle and other kind of like very aggressive weaponry. Do something like that, and then when it comes to the power weapons, instead of just, like, you can spawn in a Spartan laser whenever you want, have people fight for objectives that happen on the map in, like, different ways, like, oh, there's an elite that is currently trying to make its way across the map. If you can kill him, we're gonna drop off a pod full of power weapons for your team to use. Something like that to kind of encourage people to fight over objectives. Those are just a few ideas that I had, but ultimately I hope that answered your question. So we're gonna move on to Kagwee, who says, Q&A. Now that Halo Wars 2 came out, how do you feel if Jerome and Isabel replace Chief and Cortana? Maybe not full-on replace, but take a much larger role in the series. So, in my opinion, I actually really like Jerome and Isabel in Halo Wars 2. There's a specific moment where Jerome takes Isabel, and here, we're going to talk about spoilers, so if you haven't, well, no, it's not that spoilery. Basically, there's a thing exploding, and Jerome takes Isabel, and he's like, oh, hang on, like, and he is being all cool, he's being his badass Spartan, and he leaps out of the exploding thing, and Isabel is like laughing and stuff, and wow, this is amazing, you're so cool, Jerome. And it reminded me a lot of the older days of Halo, with Master Chief just being cool, and with Cortana just being, you know, an AI or something. And I feel that if Jerome and Isabel were to become kind of mainstays, I could see them having their own spin-off Halo first-person shooter, or if 343 ever wanted to replace Master Chief. Now, I know everyone's like, oh, replace the Chief. Now, hang on, just hear me out. If the day comes where that does need to happen for whatever reason, I wouldn't mind having Jerome and Isabel being kind of like the main characters, because Jerome is pretty cool in Halo Wars 2, and Isabel, I do actually like her as a character, and I would like to see her kind of hang out with Jerome a lot more, because they have good chemistry in Halo Wars 2. So I hope that answers your question, man, and we are going to move on to the final question, which comes from Cody Broadstone. Now, this is a question that I have been asked a lot, and I have kind of like stayed away from answering it, but, you know, I'm being asked it so much that, okay, we're going to talk about it. So he says, Q&A, how happy are you that Brian Reed is no longer narrative director for Halo? Do you have any faith left in 343 to make a decent and coherent story after Halo 5's campaign? And are you hoping they stick with only the Chief's perspective for the next installment? Thanks. So, recently, the narrative director position at 343 was open, and previously that was Brian Reed's position. So a lot of people have kind of done the whole ding dong, the witch is dead. People jump to the conclusion that Brian Reed has either left or been fired from 343. There is no confirmation on that. I see a lot of people, like, you know, talking about it like it's fact and stuff. Like, no, we don't. Just the only thing we have right now is that the narrative director position is open. Who knows what Brian Reed is up to and stuff. Personally, I feel partially responsible for kind of the community's hatred towards Brian Reed as a writer. I created a video a little while ago that really started to gain traction, and it was basically me talking about Brian Reed because I looked through Halo's credits and I just saw, like, lead writer, Brian Reed. I did a little bit of research on him. He did, you know, the kind of parts of Halo Escalation that people weren't a fan of, so I was just like, oh, he's a bad writer. That's why Halo 5's campaign is such a poop from a butt. Like, that must be the only reason. There are no other factors. And I made this very poorly thought out video basically demonizing him and saying he's the reason that Halo sucks, and it's his decisions. Everything about Halo 5 was, he wanted to do it, and he personally ruined Halo. And the video got really big. The name Brian Reed really started to pick up in the community after that, and soon Brian Reed was this demon in the eyes of the community, and I feel incredibly stupid for making that video. I feel incredibly guilty. I really do wish I had not made that video, because, you know, the more things that kind of, like, the further we go, the more I start to learn a little bit about the way that games are developed and stuff. My trip to 343, like, all sorts of other things, and just, like, there are so many factors that go into making a video game that Halo 5's story could not have been the result of one writer. Like, Halo's writing, like, there is an entire team of writers there, of lore guys, of, like, writers, of in-game mission dialogue writers, of directors for the cutscenes, not to mention that sometimes the level designers can have a say, because they'll say, like, okay, like, this is a cool story moment, but how can we turn this into a fun level? Like, so there are so many factors that go, or even, like, this game's got to be rated T for teen. You can't do that, because that could be a little bit too much for a rated T game, and so there are all sorts of factors that go into it, and I do not think Halo 5 was Brian Reed's fault. Like, that's not fair to put the blame on that man, and I really regret doing that video, because it really demonized him in the eyes of a lot of people. If 343 does not work or if Brian Reed does not work for 343, I hope it is not him being fired as a result of, like, community backlash to him. I also hope that he was literally not bullied out of that position, like leaving because he was just so hated by the community. I hope that that was not the case, and if he does not work for 343 anymore, I hope that he is able to find a good place for himself, a place that is a lot more stress-free, and a place where maybe he can flex some of his strengths as a writer, where obviously the Halo series I don't think was his strong point. So ultimately, I hope that he's able to land on his feet if he does not work at 343 anymore, and you know, I wish that people would stop talking about this like Halo is now saved. Oh my god, the demon's been exorcised from the franchise. And, you know, to be honest, I think that the next couple of years for the Halo franchise are going to be a very interesting next couple of years. Because currently, 343 has a lot of community feedback now, and it's important community feedback. I've seen a lot of people just say, like, oh, they screwed up 2 Halo games, like, they just, like, screw it, like, you know, mainline Halo games, like, they'll never learn. But I would argue, well, look, so with Halo 4, they tried one extreme. The extreme being, let's tell a super deep, super lore-filled, complex story. And it's like, okay, there you go, and the community reacted to it, and they're like, oh, okay, that was not good, let's try the other extreme, which is make it not connected to the expanded lore in any way, and try to create our own lore within that game, and like basically also try to have a very dumbed down, very simple story with very dumbed down characters, like Osiris and stuff. And In Halo 5, you had just nonsense being thrown at the player, like just suddenly this Warden Eternal was created out of thin air without him ever being in the lore before. The domain suddenly is rebuilt, something that the lore never tackled. We've got Cortana now seemingly back from the dead, saying that, oh, she found the Fountain of Youth, something that the lore never tackled before. Like, the game was basically, when it wasn't just being boring and dull, it was just unloading nonsensical exposition at the player because the lore never tackled any of these issues. And so Halo 5 was just like this disorganized mess of sloppy exposition and just boring characters and like just boring everything and nonsensical storytelling. And so they have now, 343 has tried both extremes. And so now what they've got is a lot of feedback, and now what they need to do is try to find a middle ground. And Halo 6, I think, is going to be the middle ground. Halo Wars 2, I think, was kind of the demonstration of how Halo games will be portrayed in the future in terms of the pacing of, like, the characters and stuff. Like, Halo Wars 2, I don't think the story was particularly good, but the in-cutscene dialogue, the way that the characters interacted with each other, the flow of the cutscenes in general, I do think was a lot closer to the Bungie cutscenes that people love than a lot of people give them credit for. And while I think that Halo Wars 2's story is not how Halo is going to be, like, now every Halo game is just not going to have a story and it's all going to end on a cliffhanger, you know, you better buy the sequel. I think that that type of story is what we're going to see in Halo 6, but obviously a little bit longer and with a conclusion, hopefully. So with Halo 6, I have hopes for the narrative. It's going to be very interesting because currently now 343 has tried both ends of the spectrum and they've gathered a lot of feedback. Like, a lot of people just say, oh, they keep saying that after every Halo game, and it's like, yeah, that's true, but now they have tried both ends of the spectrum and they have data on both possible extremes for Halo storytelling. So Halo 6 is in a much more different position than Halo 4 was, or Halo 5 was. Like, this time it will be different, and we need to see how it plays out. We need to see what 343 does with the feedback that they got from both ends of the spectrum. And overall, I think it's going to be interesting. But those are just my thoughts on it. And so, guys, that's all the questions for this week. Now, I've got a question for all of you. If you were to fix Halo's story, like in Halo 6, you can do whatever you want for Halo 6's story except for retcon Halo 5 out of existence. That's out of the question, alright? Cortana is evil right now in Halo 6. She's the main antagonist. What would you do to actually make it work, in your opinion? So just leave basically your thoughts in the comment section below. I want to read your answers to my question, and I'll see you guys on the next video.